Bill, looks like it is recording.
Bill, are there any other
Yeah,
attendees
yeah.
to the meeting other than the
It looks like we
Board
have 7
members.
attendees.
there's Doug.
Yeah.
Hi, Doug. Good evening.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Good evening. I found it in clutter, Tim.
Okay.
I knew there was something there.
I'm glad you found it.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay.
Council member, do you see the chat from Council Member Lupien? Will we be allowed to comment? Yes.
I'm sorry, Tim.
Council Member Lupien sent a chat. Will we be allowed to comment?
Yes. I mean, when recognized. So I will, will you just remind me if I don't do it on my own initiative, just to pause and let her or anyone else that's attending remotely comment? They can also attend live, can they not? Or is it just restricted to?
No, I think I can allow to talk. If I hover over their names, it gives me a button that says allow to talk. So if we want to do that, we can.
Okay.
Just let me know.
Okay. Well, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I noticed that Council President Scott had indicated that she may very well not be able to attend the meeting this evening. Has anyone heard from Mr. Patterson?
I have not.
Okay. So we do have a quorum, though, with 5 out of the 7 members of the Ethics Board being present. That's Mr. Escher, Mr. Graham, Ms. Cannon, myself, and Mr. Weir. So we have 5 out of the 8. 5 out of the 7. I'm getting rusty with my math. 5 out of the 7 here in attendance. So we do have a quorum. And the first issue is the minutes from the July 13th board meeting. Because of some scheduling challenges, we did not hold a meeting in August. So this is the first meeting thereafter. That was in everyone's board packets. Were there any questions or is there any discussion on the minutes from anybody? Okay, I would therefore call for approval of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I guess that's right. Okay. I did not see any nays or hear any nays. So that being said, the minutes are approved unanimously by those attending. And then the first item of business is an item that continues over from, I believe, actually the last 2 ethics board meetings. And that involves a complaint which has been designated complaint 21-1, which was amended and supplemented once. Tim, do you want to just quickly go through what the underlying issues are in terms of the facts that were alleged to have been ethics violations? I think everyone has a summary sheet. So am I correct that the complaint itself did not note any specific provisions of the ethics code? These are the ones that we've reviewed and determined may be applicable. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Okay. So,
yes.
Okay. So why don't you just quickly go through to refresh everybody's memory, just take a minute as to what the facts are that give rise to the complaint, so that everyone is on the same page.
Sure. And this would be kind of a continuation of our discussion that we had at the last live meeting where we focused on complaint 21-1 and 1A, both coming from the Rochester Police Locust Club concerning Councilmember Lupien. And if you recall, we really focused in our last discussion, we focused on 21.1, which really is concerning a correspondence that the council member sent to her constituency out in the public. And in that communication provided, in part, provided some talking points on behalf of one particular group known as Color of Change. And our discussion centered around whether or not sending that communication out using city email, which would be city resources, using her council member title and her tagline, and whether or not that would be a violation of the Code of Ethics. In particular, we focused on C4 and C5, which was whether or not she was treating one particular group more favorable than another, and also whether or not that would be a misuse of city equipment, obviously the email in this situation. So that was the focus of the discussion. I don't think we were able to really discuss 1A. So maybe a good start would be to kind of reinvigorate that discussion and decide whether or not we believe there's a violation of the ethics code with respect to the correspondence.
And my recollection, I mean, I think where we ended up, as I recall, and please correct me, is that the consideration centered on whether essentially in the capacity of a city council member, one group was given certain preferences over another group, and that was done through the use of city-owned property. And I think that we noted that essentially it's ethics code considerations C4 and C5, which tend to have been probably the biggest single area that we've been asked to render perspectives on, and that also was involved because I think it's a delicate area. I think my recollection was I felt that the perspectives and the viewpoints of the council member were clearly appropriate in the sense of her being able to take positions and give her viewpoints on different on this particular matter. I think it was simply the reference to one particular organization and doing that through the city emails. That was the troubling part that bothered me. Why don't I just turn over to the other four members of the board and see if they had any. Do you have any further comments or thoughts? And did I summarize that correctly?
Was there discussion that maybe our code of ethics needed to be reviewed?
Yes, we did also talk about that. It's independent of this issue, but I think it's
on this case.
Yeah, I think we tend to trip over some of the provisions because of the way they're worded, and I clearly would support that effort.
Carl, I think that you captured the essence of what we kind of concluded. So what appeared to be the key issues. It was a question of where do we stand from there? What action can we take? And if the rules that we have under ethics, do they give us the right to move forward, or if we need to question those, what review do we need to go through to be able to make a kind of a ruling here on this stand?
And if I recall, I think the other topic we discussed really was trying to decide the difference between advocating a position as an elected official and that line where you move from advocating for your position to advocating for a particular person or group. And I think that's I remember Patrick asked us, well, if there were other people that were included, maybe sharing the same position, talking points or different talking points, would that change our view? And would that make it move farther away from a violation? And I think we, at least in part, somewhat agreed with that. So, and I think the other issue that came about was, I think from some of the public comments related to the fact that maybe this line may have been crossed by others in the past, and that it's, as an elected official, it's it's a delicate balance when you're advocating for a particular position and for your constituents to support that position. So I think there were some discussions regarding that. So, I mean, that's the best of my recollection.
That's what I recall as well. Mia, Doug, any other? Comments, thoughts?
Just a little confused regarding as the ethics says that she's not supposed to do this to one specific group. If this was open to, as Patrick said, if this went to various groups or individuals, it would be a different matter. But this was with videos on how to respond by this one particular group.
I think it was advocating support for one particular group.
One particular group. And as being new to the board, as others mentioned, others may have done this in the past. Is there any recollection of how?
Well, I think that kind of gets into what I was going to do, is express my thoughts on it. It's where I think the decision should come out. But I think before we do that, I think we have, and it may be the council member herself or some other attendees to this virtual meeting that may want the opportunity to again, present any perspectives or thoughts that they might have. Okay, so can you allow them to participate
Yes.
live?
Carl,
Yes.
can I just ask that if we're going to have members of the public to speak, that they're limited, time limited?
Yeah, the
I
rule.
think during the live meeting, we limited.
Yeah, the board rules of procedure are noted that it's a 3-minute opportunity to address the board with leave to go further if one of the members of the board so desires.
Okay, so I will, let me select Councilmember Loopy and allow to talk and see if this actually,
Yep.
There we go.
I see a smile.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can.
Okay.
Hello, good evening.
Hello. I don't know if I can, I don't think I can turn my video on, but anyway.
Well, there's a nice picture of you appearing, so.
Thank you again for, your thoughtful discussion on this topic. I've had 2 months to think deeper about the issue and kind of go over what you all talked about in terms of other instances that were similar, but were found to not have violated the ethics code. And what I remember hearing is, one, which you already mentioned, about advantaging one group over the other. And would they have had the opportunity, another group, to also, have their platform elevated. And so with the ride sharing fare, I think that it was stated that, it wasn't offered to other companies, but they could have reached out and would have gotten the same treatment. And so in a similar way, if any other organization had a petition to investigate the RPD by the Department of Justice, I would have shared it as well. It just happened to be that color change was the only one that I had seen that was, had a campaign around it. And I believe, someone had asked me if I would have shared a Locust Club email. And I certainly would have if they were asking for the investigation. The other thing I remember being discussed was whether or not the prior incidences of the Lyft and I think it was Lyft ride sharing company job fair and the United Way as being in the public good. And it was in question about whether or not calling for an investigation was in the public good. And that makes me uncomfortable because it seems like this ethics board is setting themselves up to be the arbiter of what is in the public good and what is not. And I would venture to say that calling for an investigation in transparency and accountability of a government organization is certainly in the public good, especially a year later from the RPD response to the protesters, and what we now know was very excessive. In having an investigation and an abuse of force and power by a government organization, I believe is certainly in the public good. So, I feel that in the past, this board has made exemptions for things that have come from the administration that have used way more city resources than my email address, and they have been excused. So I would ask this board to apply the ethics code, their interpretation of it equally, even though I am not the mayor, and I may have some
Lucian, your
folks who
time
don't
is
agree
up.
with me.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, do you want to just conclude your comments, Councilwoman? Or is there anyone, let me ask the other board members, would you like her to continue or?
I was done.
Okay, so I'll give you another minute just to wrap up then, if you would, please.
No, I was just trying to finish my last sentence, which was, I would ask that the board apply the ethics code equally to my situation, as was given the ethics complaints around the ride share and the United Way cases. Thank you.
And thank you very much.
And I apologize for not being able to put you on video. I just not exactly sure how to do that, and I didn't want to interrupt what we're doing here. So I appreciate that, and thank you. I'm going to put you back on mute.
Okay.
I don't see any.
Good, Mr. Ware?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. So, to me, I'm somewhat conflicted because I think the councilwoman raises some good points. I think the challenge we have, which Mr. Escher pointed out appropriately, is that the ethics code, if written literally, would always have a violation. I mean, I'm looking at it here and it says, you can't favor any other person. You can't favor one person more than another. I think if that was an absolute standard, I don't know if you could ever do anything, because almost any action you do tends to benefit or favor some individuals more than others. And I think I was part of that decision that said, I think if it's done in an effort for the general public, which is also incorporated in the ethics code, if it's for the benefit of the general public, that that concept had to be inferred as part of the ethics code, and then but we've struggled with it, and we've struggled with it. I think we're clearly, for example, providing jobs to city residents. I think it's hard for anybody to be against that. I think in terms of being able to distribute different materials, informational materials, but that perhaps favored one person versus another. That was another difficult situation. And I guess, my thought would be in this case that the it really, I think the violation is a de minimis one. I don't think there was an intent to overtly favor this particular group and use, and it certainly was de minimis in terms of city resources, but I think there was a technical violation even reading into the for the public good, because obviously there are those in the community that don't necessarily agree that this particular organization is beneficial or would support it. So I think this is a little more problematic than where you have some of the other items where it did favor one organization over another, but at least it was in a less controversial area. So I'm inclined to indicate that I think there was a technical violation. I think it was de minimis though in scope, and that simply suggests that the councilwoman just exercise caution in terms of when she uses her official title and uses official city resources as to trying to promote whatever viewpoints and perspectives that she has, which some of them are very, very good, but just do it in a way that's neutral to all individual organizations and parties out there.
Yeah, Carl, I agree with your position on that. I do believe it's a violation. I would call it a technical violation. I wouldn't argue the point that others have treaded on this line in elected office before. I think it's pretty common, and I think it's a fine line between being passionate and advocate about your position and advocate it in a way that you can support the people that support you. So I agree with that. I think but it technically was a violation, but it was de minimis. I like that word. I think that's a good description of what it was as far as using resources and misusing city resources. So I concur with your thoughts.
Kevin, Mia, Doug?
I'll say that I also do agree that it was a violation of C3, which is the use of the city-owned property. And in this case, it was the email. I don't want to lean too heavily on what could have, would have, should have happened in the past, because unless there was a violation brought before this board, there was no opportunity for us to make a judgment on any said or potential violations. Again, it's not appropriate for people to make comments or arguments in the chat. That's not what we're here for. We will acknowledge you as a panel when we are able to. It's not violating your freedom of speech. We will acknowledge you when we're able to.
And what form of acknowledgement did you mean by that, Mia?
I'm looking, I have the chat open in the, I have the chat open here, and I'm seeing different comments and gestures.
Oh, I see. Okay.
From people who have not been acknowledged to speak or make a comment from our attendees. And I just, that's not something that we would have allowed to happen if we were live in chambers. I don't think it's an appropriate use of our time or resources to do so.
Was there someone in addition to the councilwoman that did want to speak before we got into deliberation?
Yes, now that I review this, it looks like there is a member of the public that has their hand up. Emma Lee. Would you like me to provide her access?
If it was simply an oversight on my part and she did want to comment after the councilwoman spoke, I would ask the the board to approve letting her speak at this time.
Okay,
We'd say it's okay.
okay.
Okay. For a brief 3-minute period.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, great. I would like to applaud your decision to recognize that Councilmember Lupien's actions were guided by her care for the public good. I would also like to state my firm opinion that an investigation of our police force that has a history of brutalizing and killing people.
Excuse me, this is simply
Would-
about the narrow ethical issues that we're trying to address, and it's not
Right.
about public policy. So if you could just.
I would like to, right, okay, since I only have 3 minutes, I will try to, just please gloss over whatever is not appropriate, okay? Because I want to speak from my heart here. I do feel that as an ethics board, considering what is best for people comes into play, but I also would like to point out that, not discerning what is in the public good would not be appropriate. And I appreciate that that's not what you're taking into account here. I also feel that looking at how this has been dealt with in the past is the only thing that you have to work with. So I think until the code of ethics is reviewed and perhaps made more clear, that erring on the side of caution as you are to overlook this at this time is the best plan of action, and I commend you for that. And I also hope that in the future, I guess I would like to add on that I think that an investigation of the police force would be good for everyone. I really don't see why that's even a discussion, because if they have nothing to hide,
Okay,
then
but again,
that
that's
would
off
only make
topic. That's not
transparency,
that's
but
not what-
transparency is good, yeah. So, and I also appreciate that there is an organization that is willing to provide that transparency to us. And I wish that there were more, and I'm sure that Councilmember Lupien would share all of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it Emma? Thank you, Emma. Okay. We all caught up now? So
I
I
believe so.
apologize, Emma, that I didn't see that you were wanting to speak a little earlier. Okay, so I guess just continuing the deliberation. Doug, Kevin?
Yeah, I would agree, Carl, that, it's a technical violation. And I would look into it, into the future and the code, and see if we could really fine tune it so it's black or white. This is kind of gray and technical, but I'd agree.
Well, I laud your optimism, Doug. I will tell you that, unfortunately, being a lawyer, laws are never black and white. There's always a shade of gray, and but I think clearly it's a little more gray than anybody's comfortable with right now. We need to get that a little darker tone on that gray.
I got you. Thank you.
Mr. Graham.
I think it's clear that the use of the email is really all we're really talking about, and not the content of what was in it itself. And that's the only thing.
Other than the reference to the particular organization.
Other than the reference to, the reference to the particular organization with the email. That is really it. And unless even I feel that even a further review of the rules for the ethics, wouldn't change the action that actually happened. And if this were to happen in the future, we would possibly be along the same lines, looking at the same outcome. If someone used their email address in this fashion, would there be ever room to say, we can forgive them for whatever the issue is? And I think that's the only thing is in question. And right now, it was used. I'm not seeing a way around that. And whether you agree or not agree what the information was, it was something that did happen. And how do we move forward from there?
Okay, I think we have a consensus as to, I was taking notes that there's a view that while de minimis, there was a violation, and clearly caught up in providing maybe a little more clarity in the ethics code so that there'd be more guidance for public officials. I think and this probably will go into our discussions on a rewrite of the ethics code, but I think, my viewpoint is elected representatives are stewards of the people, and they're to represent everyone, and that's a very difficult, challenging thing. I commend Ms. Lupien for doing it because it's difficult, and you've got a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives, and to try to represent everyone within your district or your constituency is always a challenge. So I do respect that, but I think I would agree, Kevin. I think there's a thought that this really goes to representing all the people and being able to be part of dialogue, but not getting into the weeds in terms of any particular organization or person or weighing in at that level. So I think what I'm going to do is I will go ahead and write up a draft advisory opinion, which is all that we can do is do an advisory opinion. I will circulate that all to the two council members that are not, our ethics board members that are not able to join us tonight, to see if they concur or might have different perspectives, and then try to bring that written opinion to the next Board of Ethics meeting for final approval and dissemination. If the board so concurs, I will proceed then.
I concur.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
And should we then move to the next complaint, which is the second one of this year? So it's 21-2, I believe.
It would be 21-1A.
1A.
Yeah, so this is the amended complaint that was received again concerning Councilmember Lupien. And this one, just in kind of a quick summary, relates to allegations that Councilmember Lupien released non-public information to a local attorney, Elliot Shields, regarding ongoing civil litigation involving the city. In that complaint, I think there was a link to a deposition that was part of the council's independent investigation that was given by Councilmember Lupien. And there's a second part of that complaint that expresses some concern about Councilmember Lupien's association with a city employee who works in the IT department and also serves as Councilmember Lupien, or has in the past served as her campaign manager, according to the information was provided in the complaint. So, two parts.
I guess to me, this issue is really the code clearly prohibits city officials from disclosing without proper authorization, non-public information or records on any aspect of government, and using such information to the advantage of themselves or any other person. That really is more of a factual determination as to whether there was unauthorized public information disseminated I think I turn it over to even go further. You'd have to start out with the fact that that was the case. So, and I guess I would turn this over to acting corporation counsel, who's part of this meeting. Has there been any such determination, Patrick, on that issue that's alleged?
We haven't looked into that to make a preliminary determination as to whether the information released was non-public. But we can certainly do that if the board requests.
Okay, I at least from my standpoint, I don't know how we can proceed until that determination is made, whether the allegation is even true or not, that there was, unauthorized non-public information disseminated. How do the other board members feel about it?
Carl, I agree. And I think without that clear determination from the city to understand whether it was actually happening with that, there's really nothing that we can do. And I motion that we table 21-2, no,
1A.
1A
Sorry.
until our next meeting or until a later time where Patrick has the opportunity to investigate the matter.
I agree.
That would be my thought. Is there anyone attending the meeting that wanted to make any comments? Since you're the
Yeah, I was going to say that we do have a couple of hands that are up.
okay.
Are these new hands or? Before
one
we
appears-
go there, Carl, just one topic to raise. I do have a statement that was provided to me by the Rochester Police Locust Club regarding this particular issue. So I don't know if that's something we want to talk about now.
Oh, yeah. Actually, so what? Before then we get into public comments, why don't? That is a written public comment. That why don't we have that read into the record so that we can note that.
Okay. So I received this today from the Rochester Police Locust Club regarding complaint 21-1A, September 7th, 2021. Quote, we submitted our ethics complaint to the board and included the transcript taken during the independent investigation conducted by attorneys Tadovich and Chelly of City Councilperson Mary Lupien. This transcript shows the councilperson was unethical and worked actively against the interests of the city and its residents. It is our belief that she knew of the ethics she was violating and therefore did everything she could to hide it from those outside her circle. In one exchange with Shields, the Prude family attorney, he texts Lupien, quote, "But I'll tell you, Daniel Prude won't settle for less than several million. So they shouldn't build that police station and instead just settle all of the bad police misconduct cases," end quote. Lupien responded saying, quote, "Right, it's going to take a lot to stop that vote," end quote. She was made aware of the family's lawsuit by Shields on July 23rd, and she knowingly worked with this attorney who was suing the city and passed information back and forth with several local activists, friends, and an information technology worker within the RPD who is her campaign manager. She set a goal in place to use this information before its release. In her words, quote, "We were strategizing about how to lift the information on kind of a national level," end quote. A reading of the full transcript shows the length she took to advance her own personal agenda and her active involvement in using this unethical activity to further advance her goal of demonizing the police at any cost. And that would be the end of the statement.
Okay. And I guess I would just note, Tim, could you reach back to the complainant and obviously it's clear to me that the issue they're raising or I believe is an issue regarding releasing non-public information. There's some vague, most of it is actually just vague allegations and characterizations of unethical and not in the interest of the city. Can you find, we're constrained by the specific provisions of the ethics code. And not, we don't have a general unethical or ethical standard. That's not what is in the ethics code. Whether this board simply believes something is ethical or unethical, that's not what we're about. So can you reach back and see if they are alleging other specific violations of the ethics code in addition to, I believe it's C1, which has to do with the, I'm sorry, it's C7. C7 is the one regarding release of non-public information. And just so when we resume the discussion, we know specifically what provisions they believe are being violated, if any.
Yes, I can do that. Yeah, I think you're correct in reviewing the complaint again. The only reference is to provision 7 regarding non-public information. So I will check back and attempt to get more clarification.
Okay. You said we've got some other hands out there, or?
I think these are not new hands up. I think they were the hands up that we've already allowed to speak.
Regarding on the first issue, okay.
Yes.
And Mary said in the chat that she'd like to speak to 21-1A before we table it.
Okay. Let me see here.
I think I still have the ability to speak if you'll recognize me.
Yeah, yes, I recognize you. I just realized that. Yep. Go ahead.
You're recognized as long as we have the technical capability to do so.
So to the point about releasing non-public information, I wasn't given any non-public information from the city. It was actually this lawyer that gave me information about the incident and the lawsuit, which, neither of which were, I think, non-public given their nature. As for the other accusations and my own, political agenda, I'll leave that until there's a specific ethics code violation that he's citing. And then certainly, my relationship with another city employee, I'm not aware of that violating any ethics code provisions. And certainly that's duplicated throughout City Hall with, other political relationships that are non-political at work and outside of work. They do politics. So that is all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Anyone else out there?
No, I don't see any new hands up.
Okay, so moving on then to the new business, which is C21-2. Tim, you want to give us a brief overview of that and we can start the discussion?
Sure. Organize myself here. So complaint 21-2 is a complaint from the Rochester Police Locust Club regarding several police accountability board members, and is focused on their attendance at a post-election gathering for a city council candidate, and allegations that they were present or participated in some anti-law enforcement chants or speeches, and whether or not that would be a conflict of interest. They list a couple provisions. One is C1, which would fall within our jurisdiction. And in that, keep in mind that the police accountability board members would need to have some kind of interest that would impair their independent judgment in carrying out their duties as PAB board members. And they also cite the PAB legislation, section 18.9, subsection A, B, and C, which are conflict of interest statutes described in the legislation, which, and I would, I guess, defer to Patrick on this, but I'm not sure that we have any jurisdiction to weigh in on any kind of conflict of interest provisions within PAB legislation.
Okay. I mean,
I think generally that's probably correct. I'd want to take a closer look at that question, Tim, and get back to the board on it. But certainly if they've raised a complaint under some portion of the code, I think we can move forward with that while we have this other issue pending.
Patrick, as long as we have the benefit of your presence, is our PAB representatives officers of the city? They're not employees, clearly.
They're not employees, they're board members, and so they're subject to the ethics code.
So they would be city officers, as that term is used in the.
I don't know that I'm going to go that far. I think there's a distinction between board members and officers and employees under the public officers law. But certainly they are subject to the city's ethics code, which applies to members of all boards.
Could you, could I ask you just for the next meeting to check into that, because the code of ethics clearly only relates to city officers and employees. And, you know, we've always taken the position, for example, that city council members are officers of the city, rightly or wrongly. I assume they are. But you could look at with this new board, would members of that be in the same situation?
I think I see what you're talking about with the definition of officer or employee under the ethics code specifically, not more broadly under the public officers law. And there it's clear in the code, the definition includes members of administrative or advisory boards. The PAB would be such a board.
Just trying to do the rest of the board members a favor, trying to get out of the issue, but didn't work very well.
Yeah.
So, okay, so it does apply to the PAB. And I think, you know, my view going in would be that we can only deal with the provisions of the ethics code and not anything in any other enacting legislation of the PAB. But Patrick, you'll get back to that on it. And then would you just confirm that the issue they are raising is C7, Tim, like the other one? Just so we have a clarification. What issues are they? What provisions of the ethics code do they believe have been violated?
Yes, I can do that. I'm pretty sure, if you give me 2 seconds. Yes, in the amended complaint, they specifically list, they provide the Twitter links, Facebook links of the actual video, which I think many of us have seen or at least reviewed. And then they list the PAB legislation, section 18.9, titled Conflict of Interest. And that's A, B, and C within that section, all about conflict of interest within the PAB legislation. And then they also list C1, which obviously would fall under our jurisdiction relating to, you know, no city officer or employee should have any employment, engage in any business or commercial transaction, or engage in any professional activity, or incur any obligation as a result which directly or indirectly he or she would have an interest that would impair his or her independence of judgment or action in the performance of their duties, or would conflict with the performance of official duties. So they do, in this complaint, they specifically list that. They're pretty clear.
Well, in the event that, which would be my belief, that the Board of Ethics doesn't adjudicate issues under the PAB, ordinance or authorization. Just confirm with them that other than C1, whether they believe any other part of the code of ethics is involved. So that if we come back and find out that, as I think, we're limited to issues under the code of ethics, that we make sure that we've covered all the bases they on that.
Will do.
Okay. So, silence. Silence is golden. I guess it's appropriate time to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay, I hereby declare the meeting adjourned. It was good seeing you all this evening. You have the date for the October meeting by any chance, Tim? Probably about October 10th, something like that.
October 6th.
October 6th. Huh? Is that Columbus Day?
No, that's a
That's
Wednesday.
later. That's 14th. Okay. Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing you all then on October 6th. I guess my guess would be likely as we'll be back again in Zoom mode like tonight. If that changes, we'll let
Excuse
you
me,
know.
I have it on my calendar as October 5th.
Oh, Tim, can't hear you.
I said I have it on my calendar as October 5th.
October, yeah.
Tuesday, yes.
Okay. 5.
Right, 5, right.
Okay.
Well, I got an eraser.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone. Thank you again for your time and attention to these matters, and I'll look forward to seeing everyone again on the 5th.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Good
Good night
night.
now.
Yeah.